All right, let's jump right into a geological detective story. Imagine an entire sea, just gone, vanished, and then, in what's basically the blink of an eye in geological time, it comes roaring back. Today, we're piecing together the evidence for one of the most violent, most traumatic events in our planet's recent history. We're talking about the Zanclean Flood.
So, let me start with a question that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. Could the entire Mediterranean Sea, the sea that cradled entire civilizations, just vanish? Like poof, gone? Could it actually turn into a vast barren desert thousands of meters below sea level?
Well, the incredible answer is yes, it could, and it did. About 5.6 million years ago, that's exactly what happened. And that sets the stage for our mystery. How did it come back? And maybe even more important, just how fast did it happen?
Okay, so to really get a handle on this flood, we first have to understand the emptiness that came before it. Geologists have a name for this period, the Mycenaean salinity crisis. So what happened was this. Tectonic forces basically slammed the door shut on the ancient connection to the Atlantic Ocean. And once its main water supply was cut off, the hot Mediterranean sun just went to work. The sea literally evaporated, leaving behind this colossal, scorching hot salt basin, miles below the level of the world's oceans. I mean, try to picture it. You're standing on the coast of Italy, and you're looking down into a chasm almost 2 miles deep. That was the reality.
So, you're probably wondering, how on earth do we know any of this actually happened? And how do we figure out what came next? Well, this is where scientists had to become detectives. And the evidence, it was carved directly into the rock.
And the clues were honestly overwhelming. For starters, when they took core samples from the seafloor, they found these massive layers of salt, exactly what you'd expect if a whole sea just evaporated. But then there's the second clue, and this is where it gets truly wild. We found these enormous canyons, but they're way below today's sea level. You had rivers like the Nile and the Rhone flowing into this empty basin, and as they cascaded down to the bottom, they carved canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon. Just think about that.
And here it is, the scene of the crime, if you will, the Strait of Gibraltar. For thousands of years, this wasn't a strait at all. It was a land bridge. Basically, a giant rocky dam holding back the entire Atlantic Ocean from that empty chasm right next door.
But then, scientists looked beneath the modern seafloor. They used seismic imaging. It's kind of like a super-powered ultrasound for the Earth's crust. And what they found was the smoking gun. A massive channel, over 200 kilometers long and hundreds of meters deep, just carved right through that ancient land bridge. And the shape of this channel? That's the crucial detail.
See, this is what it all comes down to. Rivers, when they erode the land slowly over millions of years, they carve V-shaped valleys. But this channel, it's U-shaped. And that U-shape is the telltale signature of a mega flood. We're talking about an unbelievable volume of water just scouring away rock in a very, very short amount of time. This wasn't a river, no way. This was a cataclysm. So, with all the evidence pointing to a flood, the next question for scientists was, just how big was it? They started running the models, and the numbers they came up with are, frankly, almost impossible to comprehend. This was the Zanclean Flood.
Okay, just try to wrap your head around this. At its peak, the water level inside the Mediterranean basin was rising by more than 10 meters every single day. That's like imagining the water at the beach rising higher than a 3-story building between sunrise and sunset. It's just staggering.
And what about the flow of water itself? Well, the peak flow through that collapsing Gibraltar Dam reached 100 million cubic meters per second. That's a number so huge it's basically meaningless on its own, so yeah, let's put that into context.
Okay, so let's take the Amazon River. It's the largest river on Earth by a massive margin, right? Well, the Zanclean Flood at its peak was nearly 500 times more powerful than the Amazon is today. This wasn't a river. It was a huge chunk of the Atlantic Ocean being forced through a nozzle like a fire hose of truly unimaginable power.
So, the big question is, how does a dam made of solid rock fail so spectacularly? The answer is really fascinating. It's a powerful and destructive feedback loop. The flood, in essence, engineered its own catastrophic failure.
Here's how it likely went down. It probably started with just a trickle. Maybe some tectonic sinking or a slight rise in sea level allowed the first bit of Atlantic water to spill over.
That little trickle starts to erode the rock, which makes the channel just a tiny bit deeper. But a deeper channel lets more water through, and more water means faster erosion, and faster erosion means an even deeper channel, which means, you guessed it, even more water. It became an exponential runaway process. The water was carving its own gate wider and deeper at a terrifying speed.
Scientists call this the incision rate. It's the speed at which the flood was cutting down into solid rock. And at its peak, this thing was chewing through over 40 centimeters of rock a day. The waterfall was literally eroding its own cliff face, moving itself backward toward the Atlantic as it just grew and grew in power.
So we have the mechanism, this runaway feedback loop, and we have the unbelievable power. But what does that all mean for the timeline? How long did it actually take to refill a basin the size of the Mediterranean? And this, for me, is maybe the most shocking finding of all. The models show that while a tiny little trickle might have been going on for thousands of years, the main event, the part where 90% of the water got transferred, happened in a period of just a few months to maybe 2 years. An entire sea was refilled in what is, for a geologist, less than a heartbeat.
You know, a quote from the scientific paper that modeled this really sums up the sheer violence of it all. It says, "This extremely abrupt flood may have involved peak rates of sea level rise in the Mediterranean of more than 10 meters per day." That's not just a dry scientific statement. That's describing a geological catastrophe on a scale that it boggles the mind.
And that really leaves us with a final, pretty powerful thought. We tend to think of geological change as this super slow, steady, almost imperceptible process. But the Zanclean Flood just shatters that idea. It proves that our planet is capable of sudden, incredibly violent transformations on a mind-boggling scale. So it makes you wonder, if a sea can be refilled in mere months, what other sudden, dramatic changes is our dynamic planet capable of?